He was 1% of a profession, a figure of quiet routine, now the center of a room's silent, mocking laughter. Then his fingers touched the piano keys. The first note cut the air, and every assumption in that mansion froze. This is how a man they dismissed as the help became the only person in the room who mattered. His name was Leo Walsh, and in the eyes of the wealthy elite at that party, he wasn't a former concert pianist. He was just the help. A manny, a male nanny. A figure so statistically rare he defied their entire understanding of care, competence, and class. This is the true story of the 1%, not of wealth, but of a profession. And what happens when we mistake a person's uniform for their worth? Leo Walsh was part of a 1% so rare, it sparked instinctive distrust. Research shows male childcare workers are systematically perceived as less warm, less moral, and less competent than women doing the identical job. Leo felt that judgment every single day. His world was divided between two small lives and one immense house. Each morning at 6:45, he arrived at the iron gates of the Sterling estate. His vehicle, a decade-old sedan with a child seat permanently installed in the back, was a quiet anomaly against the sculpted hedges and silent electric golf carts. His charges were Oliver and Chloe Sterling, ages 7 and 5. Their mother, Evelyn Sterling, was the founder and CEO of a biotech unicorn. Their father was a footnote in a prenuptial agreement. Evelyn's life was a spreadsheet of mergers and flight paths. The children's life was Leo. He was not their first nanny. He was, however, their first *manny*. The agency had been hesitant. They told him off the record that many families simply wouldn't consider a male candidate. One mother had said to his face, "You're wonderful, but you're a man, and I'm not sure how I feel about that." The Sterling offer came with a stipulation, a 6-camera security system in the main living areas. He understood. The fear wasn't about his capability. It was a deeper, uglier suspicion, a cultural ghost that haunted every man who chose to care for children. Studies found over half of male teachers have considered leaving the profession altogether, purely due to the fear of allegations. But for Leo, this wasn't a career, it was a sanctuary. 5 years earlier, he had been Leo Walsh prodigy, the kind that burns bright and fast in the competitive crucible of classical music. He debuted at Carnegie Hall at 22, a blur of flying fingers and rapturous reviews. Then came the tremor, a faint, persistent shake in his left hand, a betrayal from his own body diagnosed as a focal task-specific dystonia. For a pianist, it was a death sentence. The very act of playing triggered the uncontrollable spasm. The music that was his language became a source of paralyzing humiliation. His agent dropped him. His fiancée left, citing the second-hand disappointment. The world of concert halls, which had defined his worth, quietly revoked his membership. He'd spent 2 years in a numb fog of retail jobs and physical therapy, the ghost of his former talent a constant, mocking echo. Then he'd seen the ad, live-in caregiver for 2 children, patience, structure, and emotional resilience required, musical aptitude a plus. The plus had felt like a faint, cosmic wink. He'd applied not for the music, but for the structure, for the chance to care for something that wouldn't judge him for his broken hands. Evelyn Sterling hired him for 3 reasons. First, his references from a short stint at a community music center were impeccable. Second, he asked no personal questions and exuded a calm that her high-strung household desperately needed. Third, and perhaps most decisively, he was the only candidate who didn't flinch when she laid out the surveillance parameters. His quiet acceptance read as transparency. So Leo built a new life on the periphery of immense wealth. His uniform was simple: jeans, a plain gray Henley functional boots. It marked him as staff, a classification the other household employees, the Guatemalan housekeepers, the Ukrainian chauffeur, understood intimately. They shared nods in the service hallway, a silent union of the people who made the illusion of effortless luxury possible. His days were a rhythm of small, profound victories, helping Oliver sound out a stubborn word, showing Chloe how to tie her shoes. He packed lunches with aesthetically pleasing cut fruit, mediated disputes over toy ownership, and invented a game called Quiet Castle that could calm a meltdown in under a minute. He was, by every metric, exceptional at his job. But to the world outside the estate, he was an incongruous puzzle. At the exclusive Maple Grove Elementary School pickup, he was the only man among a sea of mothers and female nannies. The sidelong glances were a daily currency. He heard the murmurs sometimes. "Is that their dad?" "No, I think he's the asterisk help asterisk." The word was never just a job title. It was a social category. Evelyn was not cruel, she was transactional. She paid him generously, granted him every other weekend off, and was scrupulously polite. But her politeness was a wall. He was a line item in her household management app, a variable in her logistic algorithm. She knew nothing of Carnegie Hall. To her, his musical aptitude meant he could help Oliver practice his compulsory recorder lessons. The piano in the great room was a 9-foot Steinway concert grand, a beautiful cold monument. It was tuned monthly by a specialist. No one played it. It was acoustic art, a signifier of culture for a family too busy to cultivate any. Leo would sometimes dust its lid, feeling the vibration of the polished wood like a dormant heartbeat. His left hand would twitch. He never lifted the fallboard. Some doors are better left shut. The children, however, became his solace. Oliver, serious and analytical, loved building complex Lego structures. Chloe, a whirlwind of emotion and imagination, would dictate epic stories for him to transcribe. They didn't see a former prodigy or a societal oddity. They saw Leo, the man who made the best pancakes, who could fix a ripped stuffed animal with invisible stitches, whose voice was deep and steady during thunderstorms. He thought he'd found a fragile piece, a life in the shadows of someone else's spotlight, tending to two small lights of his own. He'd made his bargain, anonymity for purpose. He would be the ghost in the machine of the Sterling estate, and in return, he could leave the ghost of Leo Walsh behind. Then came the invitation, not for him, for the asterisk household asterisk. Evelyn was hosting the annual Sterling Biotech Gala, a networking event so exclusive it doubled as a power map for the entire regional industry. All senior domestic staff were requested to circulate, to serve canapes, refill glasses, and be seen but not heard. It was, she explained in a staff memo, about presenting a seamless and elevated domestic tableau. For Leo, it was a potential minefield, a room full of Evelyn's peers, people for whom wealth was a personality trait, all observing the curious male nanny. But refusal wasn't an option. The night arrived. He wore the required uniform, black trousers, a white dress shirt provided by the house. It fit him awkwardly. He looked like a waiter, which was, of course, the point. The great room was transformed. Crystal glittered under chandelier light. The air hummed with the low frequency of money and influence. Leo moved through the crowd with a tray, a phantom. He saw the glances. The slight pause as a venture capitalist or a surgeon registered his gender, his role. The polite, icy smiles that didn't reach the eyes. He overheard snippets. "Is that the new sommelier?" "Actually, I think he's the nanny asterisk." "Yes, really." He was near the grand piano, a towering black monolith, when it happened. A cluster of men in tailored suits, their confidence radiating like body heat, were holding court. One, a man with a laugh too loud for the room, gestured with his champagne flute toward Leo. "I'm serious," the man said, his voice carrying. "Modern parenting, you outsource everything, even the mothering." His friends chuckled. "What's next? A butler to teach them to ride a bike?" Leo kept his eyes on his tray, the practiced freeze of a service professional. But the man wasn't finished. He locked eyes with Leo, a smirk playing on his lips. "No offense, pal, it's just a fascinating career choice for a man. Must be very undemanding." The silence that fell around them wasn't total, but it was profound in its radius. Eyes turned. Evelyn, across the room, had gone still, her hostess' smile frozen. She was calculating the social damage control, the breach of her seamless tableau. In that moment, Leo felt the old, familiar tremor begin in his left hand, not from neurological betrayal, but from a surge of raw, silent humiliation. The carefully built sanctuary of his new life cracked open, exposing the raw nerve of every assumption, every stereotype, every dismissive glance he'd ever endured. The ghost of Leo Walsh stirred, not with music, but with a cold, defiant fury. His gaze shifted from the smirking man to the object beside him. The polished lid of the Steinway reflected the party's glittering distortion. A door he had sworn never to open again stood before him, not as a refuge, but as a weapon. He set the silver tray down on a side table. The quiet asterisk clink was deafening. He did not look at the host. He did not look at the children watching, wide-eyed, from the staircase landing. He simply turned, walked the 3 steps to the bench, and sat down. The room held its breath. The smirking man's expression faltered, confusion replacing cruelty. Leo placed his hands over the keys. His left hand was steady. For the first time in 5 years, it was perfectly, utterly still. He played the first, thundering chord of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. The sound wasn't music. It was a seismic event. That first, dissonant chord shattered the curated silence of the party, and with it, the entire social contract of the room. For a fraction of a second, there was only the decaying vibration in the air, thick with shock. Then Leo's hands moved. What followed was not a gentle melody, but a torrent. The Rachmaninoff Prelude is a storm of descending chords and frantic, ascending scales, a technical Mount Everest that expresses pure, chaotic anguish. He played it not with the polished detachment of a concert hall, but with the raw, unfiltered emotion of a man who had finally found his voice after 5 years of silence. The tremor was gone. In its place was a terrifying, controlled power. His left hand pounded the bass notes, a heartbeat of fury. His right hand flew across the upper registers, a whirlwind of precision. He wasn't performing for them. He was exorcising a ghost. Every dismissive glance, every whispered assumption, every patronizing career choice was poured into those 60 seconds of music. The smirking man's face had drained of color, his champagne flute forgot. The cluster of suits stood immobilized, their confidence vaporized by a force they couldn't categorize. Evelyn Sterling's hand was pressed to her mouth, not in awe, but in dawning, catastrophic comprehension. She wasn't seeing her nanny. She was witnessing a stranger of immense and hidden capability sitting at the center of her $120,000 asset. Up on the staircase, Oliver and Chloe watched, their eyes like saucers. They had never heard Leo make a sound louder than a lullaby. As the final, crashing resolution echoed into silence, the room didn't erupt in applause. It remained frozen in a profound, uncomfortable void. The hierarchy had been inverted. The help had just demonstrated a form of mastery that none of them, for all their wealth and titles, could ever hope to achieve. Leo slowly lowered his hands to his lap. He did not turn to face the room. He simply stared at the piano's inner machinery, his breathing steady. The weapon had been fired. Now he had to live in the aftermath. The spell was broken by a single, slow clap. It came from an elderly man near the fireplace, a retired symphony conductor Evelyn had invited as cultural window dressing. He had tears in his eyes. "Bravo," he said, his voice cracking. "That was not played, that was lived." The party unraveled rapidly after that. Conversations resumed in hushed, frantic tones. Eyes darted between Leo, the piano, and Evelyn. The social event had become a crime scene, and everyone was a witness. Leo stood up, the simple movement somehow more commanding than any CEO's pronouncement. He walked past the stunned guest who had mocked him, not with a look of triumph, but with one of profound indifference. He retrieved his tray and resumed his circuit, as if he had merely adjusted a painting on the wall. But the world had shifted. For the rest of the evening, a strange bubble of space surrounded him. People didn't approach him to order a drink, they averted their gaze. He had become an unknowable variable. The Nanny was gone. In his place was Leo Walsh, the unanswered question. The children were put to bed by the head housekeeper, Maria. Evelyn did not speak to Leo. She moved through the remainder of the gala with a fixed, brilliant smile, performing the ultimate act of wealth, pretending nothing was wrong. But Leo saw the calculation in her eyes. This was a crisis of asset management. Her nanny was no longer a discreet utility. He was a headline waiting to happen. At 1 in the morning, when the last Tesla had whispered down the driveway, Leo was polishing glassware in the kitchen. Evelyn entered, still in her emerald green gown. She leaned against the stainless steel island, the picture of elegance amid the domestic debris. "That was quite a performance," she said, her tone neutral, probing. "It wasn't a performance," Leo replied, not looking up from a wine glass. "What was it then?" "A statement." Evelyn was silent for a long moment. "You never mentioned you were a concert pianist. You never asked what I did before. You asked if I could handle children. I can. You understand that this complicates things." Leo finally looked at her. "Does it? The children are fed, safe, and progressing. My job is unchanged." "Your asterisk visibility asterisk is changed," Evelyn countered, her CEO persona fully engaged. "That man you humiliated was Alistair Vance. He sits on the board of 3 companies I'm trying to partner with. He controls a venture fund I need access to. You didn't just play the piano, Leo. You potentially destabilized a 9-figure deal." Here was the true architecture of his world. His humanity, his history, was weighed against market valuations and boardroom politics. His defiance was now a line item under reputational risk. "What would you have preferred?" Leo asked, his voice quiet. "That I stood there and smiled while he insulted me in front of your children? Is that part of the seamless tableau?" Evelyn flinched almost imperceptibly. The moral high ground, it turned out, was not zoned for commercial development. Of course not, but there were other ways to handle it, discreet ways. "I've been discreet for 5 years, Leo said. He placed the glass down. "It's exhausting." He left her in the kitchen. The following Monday, the household operated with a strained normalcy, but the digital world had already begun to stir. Oliver, curious and tech-savvy for a 7-year-old, had done what any child would do. He'd searched for his nanny. Using the keyword Leo Walsh piano on the family tablet, he found it. A grainy 10-year-old YouTube video from a channel dedicated to classical music archives. The title, Prodigy Leo Walsh Scriabin Edud Op. 8 number 12. The view count was modest, but the comments were a time capsule of praise. A once-in-a-generation touch. Where is he now? Oliver, with the bluntness of a child, brought the tablet to his mother during her morning conference call. "Mom, look, Leo's famous." Evelyn watched the 90-second clip. She saw a younger, sharper Leo, bathed in stage light, executing passages of dizzying difficulty. She saw the awe in the audience's faces. She also saw the link below the video, a 2,000-word article from the Classical Music Review titled "The Vanishing: What Happened to Leo Walsh?" She did not click it, but she understood the scale of her miscalculation. She hadn't hired a simple caregiver. She had given sanctuary to a fallen king of a realm she didn't understand. Meanwhile, in the staff quarters, Maria, the housekeeper, approached Leo while he was folding laundry. She spoke in soft Spanish. "Mi hijo lo que hiciste fue hermoso. Why, my peligroso? My son, what you did was beautiful and very dangerous." She showed him her phone. A member of the catering staff, hidden in the service hallway, had filmed the entire incident. Not the mockery, but the performance. The 45-second clip was already circulating on a private Instagram group for local service industry workers. The caption read, "Manny at the Sterling Place shut the whole party up. Legend." Leo felt a cold dread. His sanctuary was breaching its walls. The incident was no longer contained within the gilded room. It was becoming a story, and stories have a life of their own. Evelyn's response was swift and corporate. She called a meeting with Leo in her home office, a sterile space of glass and white oak. She did not sit behind her desk. She perched on the edge of it, a posture meant to convey collaboration. "Leo, we need to talk about your role going forward." "I'm listening." "The children adore you. Your work is exceptional, but the context asterisk of your presence here has changed. The Vance situation is manageable. Alistair is a pragmatist. He's embarrassed, but he respects capability. In a strange way, you may have even intrigued him." Leo remained silent, waiting for the other shoe to drop. "However," Evelyn continued, "we now have a PR consideration, a narrative. The concert pianist Nanny is a compelling human interest story. The local press, even the lifestyle blogs, would feast on it. That level of exposure is incompatible with the privacy and security I demand for my family." "What are you proposing?" "A restructuring. Your title remains. Your duties with Oliver and Chloe remain your primary focus, but I'd like to formalize the musical component. I'd like you to curate a small, quarterly musical salon here at the house. For a select, *vetted guest list. It positions the estate as a patron of the arts. It gives your talent a sanctioned outlet, and it controls the narrative." Leo stared at her. She was offering him a gilded cage. He could play the piano, but only when and for whom she authorized. His art, which had just been an act of personal reclamation, would become a domestic amenity, like the imported water or the orchid arrangements. It was a breathtaking act of co-option. "You want me to perform on command," he stated. "I want to integrate an unexpected asset into the household portfolio," Evelyn corrected, her language pure management consultancy. "It's a significant compensation bump, and it keeps the story ***. He thought of Oliver and Chloe. He thought of the simple rhythm of their days. He thought of the alternative, being cast out jobless, with a story circulating that would make him unhireable in any discreet household. The research flashed in his mind. Men were already perceived as less competent in this field. A troublesome or famous man would be radioactive. "I need to think about it," he said. "Of course, take the evening." But the universe did not give him an evening. That afternoon, while taking the children to the botanical gardens, he noticed a woman with a large camera lens pointed not at the orchids, but at them. He subtly shifted his body to block Oliver and Chloe, guiding them toward the exit. His heart hammered against his ribs. The leak had reached the paparazzi. When he returned, Evelyn was waiting, her face pale with anger. She showed him a draft email from a gossip columnist at a major metropolitan newspaper. The subject line, "Sterling's secret, is a disgraced maestro raising her heirs." The email politely requested comment on the fascinating rumor that reclusive piano prodigy Leo Walsh was working as a nanny for tech mogul Evelyn Sterling, and that a remarkable performance at a recent gala had left guests stunned. "They know about the dystonia," Evelyn said, her voice tight. "They're framing it as a fall from grace story, a tragedy. This is exactly what I wanted to avoid." In that moment, Leo realized the full extent of the trap. His past was not his own. It was a narrative to be shaped by others, by Evelyn to control her brand, by the media to sell a salacious tale, by the public to consume as entertainment. The man at the party had mocked his present. The world was now preparing to pity his past. He looked at Evelyn, who was already drafting a crisis PR response in her head. He looked out the window at the manicured lawn, a prison of breathtaking beauty. The single, defiant act at the piano had not freed him. It had triggered a chain reaction that threatened to dismantle the fragile life he'd built. He had one move left, not to control the story, but to reclaim it. And it would require him to do the one thing he'd sworn never to do again, to step back into the light on his own terms and play not for a private salon, but for the whole world watching. Leo's move was not to hide from the story, but to own it, completely. He called the gossip columnist who had sent the email, a veteran reporter named Maya Cruz, and offered her an exclusive, not a comment, the whole truth. He met her at a public park far from the Sterling estate. He laid it out, the dystonia, the vanished career, the desperate search for a life with meaning, finding it in the care of 2 children. He spoke of the stereotypes, the surveillance cameras, the daily calculus of being a man in a woman's world. He did not portray himself as a victim or a hero. He was a case study in societal blind spots. "Why tell me this now?" Maya asked, her recorder between them. "Because the narrative is already escaping," Leo said. "I'd rather it be anchored to reality than to speculation. The disgraced maestro is a better story than the capable caregiver, but neither is entirely true. The truth is in the contradiction." The article dropped 2 days later. It was not in the gossip section. The editor, recognizing a deeper cultural thread, placed it in the Sunday magazine. The headline was simple: "The Hands That Hold, From Concert Hall to Nursery, The Unseen Life of a Nanny." It was nuanced, empathetic, and devastating. It quoted the research on gender bias in childcare. It included a poignant, dignified photo of Leo sitting on a park bench, not at a piano. The story of the gala was there, but framed as the breaking point of quiet resilience, not a sensational revenge. The reaction was a tidal wave. It crashed over the insulated world of the Sterling estate in ways no one predicted. First, the support. Hundreds of emails flooded the magazine, many from men in nursing, teaching, and childcare, sharing their own stories of stigma and isolation. A nonprofit focused on men's mental health reached out, asking Leo to be a silent ambassador. The narrative was flipping from fallen prodigy to everyman icon. Second, the business fallout. Evelyn's crisis management team was blindsided. Alistair Vance, the mocked guest, did not demand an apology. He sent Evelyn a brief, astonishing note. "Your man Walsh has more guts and talent than anyone in my boardroom. I'd like to discuss a philanthropic initiative for arts in childcare. Have him call my office." The villain of the piece had become an unlikely ally, captivated by the very defiance that humiliated him. But third, and most dangerously, came the viral fame. A clip of the Rachmaninoff performance, now paired with the magazine article, found its way to TikTok. The algorithm loved it. The dichotomy was too perfect. Manny vs. Maestro, Piano Dad, Hidden Talent. It was viewed millions of times. Suddenly, Leo Walsh was not just a local story. He was an internet moment. This was the "wait, it gets worse" moment. Public sympathy was one thing. The relentless, distorting lens of meme culture was another. People began recognizing him at the grocery store, at the children's museum. They didn't want to talk about childcare or dystonia. They wanted a selfie with the piano Manny. They shouted requests: "Play something." The sanctuary of anonymity was utterly obliterated. Evelyn's controlled, quarterly salon idea was now a laughable fantasy. The world was inviting itself to the concert, and with it came a new, insidious form of scrutiny. Online forums dedicated to classical music dissected the party video with professional ruthlessness. The technique is still there, but the emotion is uncontrolled, damaged. He's using anger as a substitute for musicality. His personal tragedy and his art were being picked apart in real time by strangers. The pressure fractured the household. Evelyn, feeling control slipping through her fingers, became coldly procedural. She implemented new, stringent security protocols. School drop-offs and pickups were now done by the chauffeur in a tinted window SUV. Leo's movements were restricted to the estate grounds unless specifically authorized. He was, in effect, under a form of luxurious house arrest, all in the name of protecting the children from the media circus. The children felt the change. Oliver became withdrawn, confused by why his friend Leo was suddenly a secret to be protected. Chloe, sensitive and perceptive, started having nightmares. She asked Leo one morning, "Are you going to leave because you're famous now?" The question gutted him. This was the core stakes. Not his career, not his pride, but the trust of 2 children who had become the center of his world. He was fighting to preserve a family he wasn't legally part of, against forces he never asked to unleash. It was Maria, the housekeeper, who delivered the pivotal revelation. She found him late one night in the staff kitchen, staring at a blank wall. She sat beside him, her hands worn from a lifetime of service. "You know," she said softly, "the other families, the rich ones on this street, they talk. Their staff talks to our staff. They are not asking about the music. They are asking Mrs. Sterling if she is not afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That you are an influence, that you put ideas in the boy's head, that a man doing this work is confusing, that your story makes their own nannies ask for more respect." She looked at him, her eyes full of a weary wisdom. "You did not just play a song. You shook the whole tree, and the people in the nice houses, they don't like fruit on the ground." Her words reframed everything. This wasn't just about Leo or Evelyn. His act of defiance was a perceived threat to an entire social order. By excelling in a devalued, feminine role, and then asserting a masculine form of elite mastery, he had broken the unwritten code. He was a living paradox that exposed the arbitrariness of their class and gender assumptions. The mockery at the party was the instinctive immune response of that social order. The current containment strategy was its calculated second wave. This was confirmed when Evelyn summoned him for a second, restructuring meeting. The polished collaboration was gone. Her tone was that of a CEO executing a difficult but necessary downsizing. "The situation is no longer tenable, Leo. The children are being affected. The security risks are escalating. The philanthropic offer from Vance is promising, but it requires a repackaging of your role, a distancing." "What does that mean?" "It means we transition you from a live-in caregiver to a specialized, part-time music tutor for Oliver and Chloe. You would move out of the estate. Your interaction would be limited to scheduled, supervised lessons. The daily care would be handled by a new, more traditional hire." It was a demotion wrapped in a promotion. He would be compartmentalized. His influence, the very thing that made him invaluable to the children, would be neutered. He would become the piano teacher, not the caregiver. The Nanny would be erased, replaced by a safer, more recognizable archetype. "And if I refuse?" Leo asked, his voice quiet. "Then I will have to terminate our agreement with a significant severance, of course, but with a non-disclosure agreement so comprehensive that you would be unable to speak of your time here or leverage this fame for any future work in this field." She met his gaze. "It's not a threat, Leo. It's risk mitigation." He was being offered a choice between two forms of exile: to stay on the periphery as a caricature of his talent, or to leave with his voice silenced. The gilded cage now had a lock. But then a new variable entered the equation. Oliver, who had been quietly listening at the door, a habit Leo himself had taught him for avoiding surprises, pushed it open. His small face was set with a determination that mirrored his mother. "No," Oliver said. Evelyn startled. "Oliver, this is a private. I don't want a new nanny, and Leo shouldn't just be a music teacher. He helped me build my science project. He knows how to make Chloe laugh when she's sad. That's not music. That's family asterisk stuff." The child's words, clumsy and profound, hung in the air. In that moment, Leo saw not a boss, but a mother facing the unintended consequences of her own transactional worldview. Her son had just articulated the exact value she had failed to measure. The standoff was broken by the chime of Evelyn's personal phone. She glanced at it and her face tightened. She showed Leo the screen. It was an email from the dean of the local conservatory. The subject line: "Formal invitation for Mr. Leo Walsh." The body was an offer, not for a teaching position, for a single high-profile comeback concert, a charity event co-sponsored by Alistair Vance's foundation. The theme: Hidden Talents Found Purpose. They wanted him to play, not in a salon, on a major stage, with the world watching. Vance had moved from philanthropy to a power play. He was calling Leo's bluff and Evelyn's hand simultaneously. He was offering Leo the very platform he'd sworn off, but now accepting it would mean walking away from the children. Refusing it would make him seem ungrateful, petty, and validate every pitying narrative about his fall. Evelyn looked from the email to her son's defiant face to Leo. The calculus had become impossible. Every move had a catastrophic countermove. The story had grown bigger than any of them. Leo knew then that the bridge had been crossed. The private defiance was over. The next move would be public, permanent, and would define not just his future, but the future of the two children watching him, waiting for the man they trusted to make a choice. The final act would not be played in a mansion, but under the lights of a stage he thought he'd lost forever, with the weight of an entire, invisible profession on his shoulders. Leo made his decision not in the office, but on the floor of Oliver's bedroom, helping reassemble a fallen Lego fortress. He looked at the boy's concentrated face and understood. His purpose wasn't to return to the stage. It was to build a new one. He counter-proposed. He would accept the conservatory's invitation for the comeback concert, but with 3 non-negotiable conditions. First, the concert's charitable proceeds would not go to a general arts fund, but to establish a new scholarship specifically for men pursuing degrees in early childhood education and care, a direct challenge to the systemic barriers he'd faced. Second, he would perform a single piece of his choosing. Third, and most critically, his performance would be dedicated to and introduced by Oliver and Chloe Sterling. Evelyn was stunned. Alistair Vance was delighted. The conservatory dean, seeing the potent PR cocktail of redemption, philanthropy, and social justice, agreed immediately. The Hidden Talents Found Purpose concert now had a razor-sharp edge. The weeks of preparation were a whirlwind. Leo began daily rehearsals on the conservatory's grand piano, his hands rediscovering their language without the poison of shame. The dystonia, his neurologist noted with surprise, had receded significantly. The doctor's theory was that the psychological burden of hiding had exacerbated the physical symptom. By integrating his fractured identities, the caregiver and the artist, his body had stopped fighting itself. Meanwhile, at the estate, a subtle but profound shift occurred. Evelyn, faced with her son's defiance and the sheer audacity of Leo's counterproposal, began to see him not as a crisis to manage, but as a partner in an unprecedented experiment. She assigned her best publicist not to contain Leo's story, but to frame it. She sat with Oliver and Chloe, coaching them on their simple, heartfelt introduction. For the first time, she was not outsourcing a problem. She was investing in a person. The night of the concert arrived. The hall was sold out, a mix of wealthy benefactors, classical music aficionados, curious social media followers, and a small, deliberate block of seats filled by men in the caring professions, nurses, nannies, teachers, invited as guests of honor. Backstage, Leo adjusted his simple gray Henley, the same uniform from the gala. He wasn't wearing a tuxedo. He was wearing his truth. Oliver and Chloe, dressed in their best clothes, held his hands, their small palms sweaty with excitement. The house lights dimmed. The stage manager gave the nod. Hand in hand, the 3 of them walked into the spotlight. A murmur of surprise rippled through the audience. This was not a soloist's grand entrance. It was a family's. Oliver stepped to the microphone, standing on a small box. His voice, amplified, was clear and strong. "This is our friend Leo. He takes care of us, and he plays the piano really, really good. This is for all the dads and guys who take care of kids, too." Chloe, unable to reach the mic, simply waved at the crowd and shouted, "We love you, Leo." The raw, unscripted humanity of the moment disarmed the entire room. Then the children went to sit with their mother in the front row. Leo was alone at the Steinway. He did not play Rachmaninoff. He did not play a warhorse of technical display. He played Johann Sebastian Bach, Goldberg Variations, a work of sublime, intricate architecture, often described as a musical meditation on solace and transformation. It requires not just virtuosity, but profound patience and intellectual clarity. It was the antithesis of the angry, defiant storm he'd unleashed at the party. This was a statement of peace, of mastery reclaimed not for conquest, but for connection. For the next 70 minutes, the hall was held in a spell. The music unfolded like a conversation, complex yet deeply serene. Leo played with a clarity and emotional depth that reviewers would later say surpassed his youthful recordings. He was no longer a prodigy. He was a master. The ghost of Leo Walsh hadn't returned. It had been laid to rest, and a fuller man had emerged in its place. The final, gentle aria da capo returned, a quiet closing of a monumental circle. As the last note faded into absolute silence, Leo kept his head bowed for a long moment. Then he looked up, not at the applauding audience, but directly at Oliver and Chloe. He smiled, a real, unguarded smile. The applause that followed was not the explosive roar of a rock concert, but a deep, sustained wave of respect. It was the sound of a room having its assumptions quietly dismantled. The men in the caregiver section were on their feet, many with tears streaming down their faces. For the first time, their work felt seen, not as a curiosity, but as a form of courage worthy of a standing ovation. After the concert and the buzzing reception, the expected happened. Agents approached, offering recording contracts. Talk show producers dangled interviews. But Leo was surrounded by a protective cordon of unexpected allies: Evelyn Sterling, Alastair Vance, and a dozen male nurses and teachers. He politely declined all immediate offers. His mission, he said, was complete. But the story had its own momentum. The footage of the children's introduction and the transcendent performance went globally viral. Major news networks picked up the narrative, but now the angle had permanently shifted. The headline was no longer "Pianist becomes nanny." It was "Why are we shocked when caregivers have hidden depths?" The conversation turned systemic, focusing on the research. The 1% statistic, the wage gap in early childhood education, the damaging stereotypes that keep men away. The payoff was concrete. The scholarship fund, fueled by the concert proceeds and a surprise matching donation from Vance, received thousands of applications in its first month. A National Childcare Association launched a See the Care campaign featuring Leo's story as a centerpiece. He was not their spokesperson, he was their case study. At the Sterling estate, a new normal settled. Evelyn did not hire a traditional nanny. She renegotiated Leo's contract on terms that reflected his true value: a hybrid role as primary caregiver and household cultural director, with a salary that matched his dual expertise and the autonomy to pursue selective, meaningful projects. The surveillance cameras in the main living areas were quietly removed. A year later, the surprising final detail emerged not in a concert hall, but in a courtroom. Inspired by the public discourse Leo's story had ignited, a coalition of male early childhood educators in the state, supported by the union, filed a class-action lawsuit against a major corporate daycare chain. The claim was not gender discrimination in hearing, but in workplace treatment and advancement, a more subtle, pernicious form of bias. They cited the research on role incongruity and hostile work environments that had been brought to mainstream attention by Leo's case. The lawsuit sought not just damages, but mandated bias training and clear career pathways. Legal experts called it a landmark case. Leo's name was never on the filing, but his story was woven throughout the supporting testimony. His single act of defiance at a piano had helped build the cultural capital necessary for a systemic legal challenge. Leo's life today is a deliberate blend. He still wakes up early, makes breakfast, and does the school run. He practices piano daily, not for a career, but for the joy of it. He sits on the board of the scholarship fund that bears his name, reviewing applications from young men whose letters often start with, "I thought I was the only one." He gives occasional, intimate performances at the estate for small groups of donors and scholarship recipients, events that feel less like salons and more like community. On a bright Tuesday afternoon, you can find him at the community center, not in the music room, but in a brightly colored classroom. He is volunteering, leading a music and movement class for toddlers. He is on the floor, clapping, singing off-key, being a human jungle gym. He is one of several men in the room, a small but growing number. The children crawl over him, laughing. Oliver and Chloe, now a little older, sometimes come to help. They have a new, simpler name for him. Not Manny, not Maestro, just Leo. The man who is proof that you can be more than one thing. That strength can be found in gentleness, and that great talent is never wasted if it is used to lift others up. His hands, once broken by expectation, are now whole. They build Lego castles, they play Bach, they wipe away tears. They are the hands that hold, and in doing so, they have changed how an entire profession is seen. The final, quiet note of his story is this. Sometimes, the most powerful performance isn't about silencing a room. It's about finally allowing yourself to be heard in all your complicated, beautiful harmony. So what does the story of a single dad and a grand piano actually change? On the surface, it's a satisfying tale of comeuppance and hidden talent. But dig deeper, and it becomes a mirror. It reflects back at us the unconscious algorithms we use to categorize people every single day. The Manny, the help, the service worker, the labels we stick on people that come preloaded with assumptions about their competence, their warmth, their moral worth, and even their hidden depths. Leo Walsh's journey from invisible caregiver to undeniable maestro forced a collision between two worlds that rarely speak: the undervalued, feminized economy of care and the high-status, celebrated world of elite artistic performance. His existence in both spaces was a living contradiction to the social script. The research is clear and cold. Men in childcare are perceived as less warm, less moral, and less competent, facing what sociologists call role incongruity. Working-class individuals are often stereotyped as high in warmth but low in competence, shuffled into service roles, and then dismissed for being in them. We build these mental boxes for efficiency, but then we forget that people are not meant to live in boxes. We confuse the uniform for the person wearing it. Leo's defiance at that party and his conscious choice afterward did more than salvage his dignity. It became a key that unlocked a public conversation. It gave language and a human face to dry statistics. It made people ask, why are we so shocked when a nanny can play Rachmaninoff? Is it the nanny part or the man part? Or is it our deep-seated belief that profound talent and elite skill must be separate from and superior to the daily, sacred work of nurturing another human being? His story didn't end sexism or classism in a single chord. Those systems are ancient and entrenched, but what it did was create a crack. It inspired a lawsuit based on workplace climate, not just hearing. It filled a scholarship fund with applications from men who finally felt seen. It changed, in a small, real way, the environment inside one wealthy home. Most importantly, it showed two children a model of integrated humanity. That strength and sensitivity, mastery and nurture are not opposites, but parts of a whole person. The lingering question isn't about Leo. It's about the other Leos. The janitor who writes sublime poetry on his break. The home health aide who is a chess champion. The retail worker with a PhD in astrophysics they never get to use. How many moments of awe, connection, and societal progress are we missing because we've been trained not to look for brilliance in certain pockets of the world? The true hidden talent in our society may not be in the people we overlook, but in our own ability to see them clearly. To look past the job title, the gender, the accent, the simple clothes, and recognize that capacity and complexity are distributed everywhere, waiting only for the chance to be revealed and respected. Leo Walsh found his music again not by leaving care behind, but by realizing it was part of the same song. A song about value, purpose, and the quiet courage it takes to be fully yourself in a world that keeps handing you simpler scripts. Subscribe if you believe the most important discoveries aren't made in distant galaxies, but in the person right next to you, waiting to be seen.